Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host. I am so happy to be back here with you. We have had a number of joining us over the last couple of days, and it feels good to be here with you alone and just have some news and just kind of think about life tonight. I'm excited to dive into something that I feel like has been a process over the last I in mid-France and then went for about 5 weeks to Italy. I really was contending with the whole of truth, and it hasn't stopped since I returned. So ever since, I've really been leaning into what do I wish were true, asking that as a prompt to help me go to bring things to light that had laid dormant for a while, and my inner life coming to mind and coming even just into awareness than I ever had before. The things that's so interesting and casting a spotlight on the truth is the reality of what is. But once we come to grips and we come face to face and we square off with that person, then we have the choice. Then we have the choice to create something new. We have the choice to become her. We come face to face with the truth. Can we see any kind of a change? Can we actually create anything other than that which is? And so even as I say this now, it's just in conversation with people over the last week. I talked with someone who is very much so keenly aware of discomfort in their time after almost 40 years of being married, and someone very dear to me about what does it look like to really engage, how much relationship and needing the truth it's like the hot topic today, of the data that's being pulled by my team whenever we post anything on the show and the Knowing podcast. So much of the topics that garnered the most attention has to do with relationships. People are hungry and desperate in this world alongside someone else. And one of the things that I'm realizing, all these different areas, because that's true in one regard, likely translates into so many others. So we talk about our core intelligences, our intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, which is true in the spiritual intelligence is likely true in the physical, and that which is true in the intellectual has ties and roots to truism in the emotional. If we really want to know the truth and reality of what is, it's looking for the area of our lives. And so as I've been diving into truth, and as I've been looking at truth in relation more, how we have to be willing to that which we know, but it starts our own ability to know. And I know that I existed for, even still recently, I'm still figuring out how to know what's true in my life. So I existed for about 30, and how then can I enter into a relationship and equilibrium, reciprocity, and care when I don't know what's true? This whole concept of see any real change in our life if we're not, which is true, but we also can't see anything new to create. And as I was preparing for the show tonight, I picked up The Art of War by and it's called A Vital Gem and a Kick in the Ass by Esquire. And on the back, the creative work is a gift to the world and every being in it. Don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. And then he continues, do you dream about writing the great American novel? Regret not finishing your paintings, poems, or wish you could start dieting or exercising today? Hope to run a marathon? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you need The Art of War. He continues. In this powerful, straight from the hip examination of the internal obstacles to success, best-selling author Stephen Pressfield shows readers how to identify, defeat, and unlock the inner barriers of creativity and truth. It starts with the truth. It starts with us willing to go inward. I was having a conversation with someone today, someone who has been kind of considering just their 40-year marriage and really illuminating some elements that need to change, and things that, had they looked in the mirror perhaps 30 years ago, 35 years ago, 39 years ago, maybe those things would have been there had they been willing to do that. Or maybe it's come up in the last 5. But the reality is that if we're not consistently, time and time again, looking in the mirror, we're not going to have a firm grasp on what is, and thus experience any kind of a change, and also allow for creation. Y'all, we are, which lends to just this existential question: why are we even here in the first place? Why do we exist here in this world? I feel this in my bones, that we are here to create. I believe so strongly that we are made in the image of the Creator himself, and thus creation runs in our blood. It is part of our DNA. But if we're not willing to go inward, we thus have nothing to contribute to the output. So if our input is constantly mirroring the world around us, and it's not original and not authentic to anything that is of us, then our output is just going to mirror everyone around us, and thus no origin, no genesis, no creativity is actually going to be coming forth. And so then we wonder, why are we sounding stale? Why am I disassociated from myself, much less from others? And so ultimately, at the end of the day, the core question is, am I willing to know the truth? And I had this conversation with this woman today about her marriage. And she's been putting herself in a new environment. And as we were talking, she was like, well, maybe I need to leave this environment because it's causing issues in my marriage. And I just reflected back to her. I was like, I think that what this is showing is what has always been there, but now it's just amplified. And so, yes, you could take away what is initially causing some of the symptoms to arise, but that's not getting to the root issue. If you return to life status quo, you're just going to be allowing for that to continue onward. So how much of our lives are we just almost, I just had this picture of like trimming the hedges rather than pulling out the plant, pulling up by the roots that which needs to go in the first place? Are we just kind of dealing away with the topical layers because addressing and dealing with the roots is so incredibly hard? And this is what's even worse. In these conversations with so many others and myself, when it is so easy to point and say, look what you're doing, and ignore the 4 fingers pointing back at us. And there's this biblical text and concept of taking the log out of our own eye. And then we can see clearly to see the little speck in someone else's eye. Here's the thing this is so frustrating, but it's so true, that their speck in their eye is likely the very thing amplifying. It's serving as a mirror to amplify that which is in our own eye. And so every time I find myself in kind of relational conflict, turmoil, every time it's like, how are you serving as a mirror for me about something in me? Now, it's dangerous to go into relationships like this, where with that mindset, if both parties don't have that kind of equilibrium in terms of self-analysis and self-awareness, it can lead to a lot of disproportionate weight and responsibility being placed on someone. So that's something that's really, really, really important for us to acknowledge. Am I and my partner approaching conflict in a similar way? And that's where defining terms is so important. At one of the knowing retreats in Vegas, I asked everyone, and there were a couple couples who were attending, and I asked everyone to define love. And it was so fun seeing all the different translations and definitions coming back. We all defined love so differently. And what was so important to recognize was that person in couple A, person one in couple A defined love very different than person, two in couple A, and person one in couple B defined it very different than their counterpart in couple B. And so, y'all, if we're fundamentally operating different terms and conditions and definitions about life, our lens needs to have a similar dial. You know, when you go to the optometrist and you put your face against the dials and then they make a little tweak and all of a sudden the characters on the wall, all of a sudden they're so clear. If we don't have a similar dials preset as our partner or as our parent or as our sibling or as our business partner, those preset dials completely change the fundamental reality that is out there. And that's partially what is terrifying, is that what is truth? When we talk about, are we allowing ourselves to see the truth? We just see such a tiny microscopic depiction of truth in and of itself, because I am seeing the world through a preset lens. They're seeing the world through a preset lens, and so is everybody else. It's like when we're on the plane and everyone is there with a completely different narrative of what their experience was getting onto that plane. That's why you can offload the aircraft and you will get 350 different testimonials about an experience, because there's 350 different lenses through which they view the world. And so it's incredibly hard for us to be able to hold a semblance of respect for others' opinions, because our preset dial is there's a dogma to our preset dial that we don't allow any kind of flexibility to say, oh, let me actually sit in your seat and view the world through your lens. But in so doing, that's what allows for empathy. It allows for us to see the world through someone else's eyes. But apart from that willingness and commitment to see the world through someone else's eyes, our own ability to thus observe the different angles of truth is obscure. So our own angle and take an approach to what is needs to be held with so much, there's a humility. And I've been diving into the Greek word for honor, and the Greek word for honor is reverence. And reverence is like this fear. This word is actually used in multiple times in the biblical text of fearing, revering God. And it's and also revering man. So it's funny, it's like this word, this holy reverence, this holy fear is used both in fearing God and in fearing man. So this term of reverence is so important, because it can be alchemized for something that is good, that orients our hierarchical structure of values, of priorities, of moral, of the moral higher good for humanity. Or our reverence can be under the guise of the horizontal. How does everyone else think I should act, look, behave, appear in the world? What should I believe? And it's under the hierarchy of a horizontal lateral fear versus a vertical fear and reverence for something that which is above us and transcends time and space altogether. And so if we're not having properly allocated reverence, we're never going to be able to allow for this ability to sit in multiple people's experience and see multiple angles, and allow for honestly this ability for, I can see where you're coming from. And so then this is where I'm getting existential as we go on this topic. Is that even truth if it changes? If my experience adjusts when I sit in someone else's seat and look through their lens and observe what happened, was my experience the truth or their experience the truth? Or is the truth actually something that is entirely outside of us altogether, and it's the objective third-party aspect of what truly occurred, and it can only be notated by having it on record, video camera, something of the sort, where it's actually recorded in time? it's so fascinating when I think about truth because there's so many layers to it. And to be honest, for so much of my life, I've just avoided the topics that kind of make me mind boggled. I've avoided the topics that make me feel uncomfortable because I really, really love people and I don't want something to get in the way of the relationship. But what I've also realized, likewise, is that if I'm not willing to speak the truth, so much time will elapse. And I've seen this both in myself and in so many others who have worked with me in the knowing arena, who have come to the knowing retreats. When we don't speak the truth, eventually over time, resentment builds. And at some point, the other person will face the consequence of their actions. Whether we were valiant and overlooked it and pretended like we didn't care for years and years and years and years. And then finally we couldn't take it anymore. And finally we exploded. Y'all, it's so important that we actually take the time to acknowledge and recognize what we are experiencing. Because I really do believe this. I think I really do. That is an aspect of truth. And I think what's really important, even as I'm thinking about this now, and this is why I'm so grateful for this show, is because it's time for us to process in real time. My experience is a part of the larger truth at whole, and their experience is a part. So if I never sit in my experience, I will fundamentally be missing access to a part of the truth. And if I never sit in their experience, I'm fundamentally missing an aspect and part of it. When I was first starting therapy 4 years ago, that was one of the biggest things that stood out. Because I had spent so much of my marriage in codependency and solely focused on them, looking at the world through their eyes and looking at the world through their lens, I really had never cultivated a thumb on the pulse of my own experience to go and sit with it and actually know how I was feeling. What did I think about it? And so over the last 3.5, 4 years, I've had to effectively learn how to be a human. What do I feel? What do I think? What are my opinions? What do I believe? Because so much of the world, apart from conscious, intentional pursuit, it's fed to us. And unless we actually go cut off the hand that feeds us and say, okay, I'm actually going to sit here and cultivate my own belief system. I'm actually going to sit here and think about sans media, sans social media, sans anyone else's voice, and really go inward and pursue. The Latin word for intuition is intuere, which means to be taught from within. Y'all, so few of us do this. And that's gold. It's like this precious access point to revelation, to divine revelation, to something which it's almost like we've always known it. And somehow it's being remembered. When I was talking about the DNA of creation, of creativity in our DNA, I believe that we somehow, each one of us, we know, it's like that whole aspect of, I don't know how I know this, but somehow I do. Each one of us have these pieces of revelation that are there for us if only we were to give time and attention to it. Even today, I was sitting here and I was working on a new business that I'm starting up, the Craft and Calling, and it's a community for folks who are in the trade space. And that's partially what I've been doing with the Craft and Calling podcast, is really focusing on creating content and creating a space for people like my dad. We've got the 100-year-old family business and painting business. And honestly, he did it in isolation so much of his life. And my brother and I came in, man, we were able to, all three of us just work so hard and double the business within 2 years. And he's set up so much better for success. And it's so exciting what we can do when we're in community. But there were parts of that dynamic when my brother and I came in where my dad had to be brave enough to face the truth. And so this concept of truth, am I willing to look in the mirror? It is not just about relationships. It's not just about ourselves. It is in every single regard. Going all the way back to the very beginning of this segment where we were talking about what's the through line of that which is true in one area of our intelligences. So if the truth must be seen in the emotional intelligence on it as it pertains to relationships, how is that concept of truth relevant in the intellectual intelligence in business? Well, if I'm not willing to look in the mirror and look at the truth of the state of my business, I'm going to be fundamentally functioning under the guise of that which is false, that which my competitors are doing, that which my customers are demanding me for, rather than the reality of what is. What are my books actually saying? What is the data actually saying? How am I actually orienting my business against the vision that I said that I wanted 10 years ago? Am I actually on the right track? Or am I living in accordance with how everyone else? I wrote this article for a digital marketer 2 years ago, and I called it the 3 C's. So many of us are orienting our businesses around, 1, our competitors, 2, our customers, or 3, what was it? Our competitors, our customers, and our colleagues. So much of the time, our businesses are oriented on a lateral, horizontal level rather than the vertical, fixed and focused on that to which we're called. That's why the title for this is craft and calling. So many times trades, businesses, we're focusing on the craft side, and we forget about the calling. We forget about why we're here in the first place. Trades or not, we come into our business saying we're doing this for the family, and then our family is the one left in the dust. And so how much of the time are we actually forgetting that which lies behind rather than bringing it to the forefront and remembering that is our mission? That's why we're doing it in the first place. Douglas James, I just saw you on Facebook. I'm so happy to see you. Y'all, this is so important. This whole question over why are we doing what we're doing? Are we looking in the mirror? Are we being willing to speak the truth, to know the truth? Because the truth is what allows for change, it allows for creation, and it ultimately is the very thing which sets us free. I want to read just a quick little segment. I read this book, I believe. Oh golly, I love when I draw or underline in books, I like putting dates associated with it. And so I didn't do that here. But this is from The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. And this is chapter, it doesn't have chapter names. It's page 51, Resistance and Support. So it's very brief. So I'm just going to read it real fast from Steven Pressfield. Have you ever been to a workshop? Those boondoggles are colleges of resistance. They ought to give out PhDs in resistance. What better way of avoiding work than going to a workshop? But what I hate even worse is the word support. Seeking support from friends and family is like having your people gathered around you at your deathbed. It's nice, but when the ship sails, all they can do is stand at the dock and wave goodbye. Any support we get from persons of flesh and blood is like monopoly money. It's not legal tender in that sphere where we have to do our own work. In fact, the more energy we spend soaking up on support from colleagues and loved ones, the weaker we become and the less capable of handling our business. My friend Carol had the following dream at a time when her life felt like it was careening out of control. She was a passenger on a bus. Bruce Springsteen was the driver. Suddenly, Springsteen bolted and handed Carol the keys. In the dream, Carol was panicking. How could she drive this huge rolling Greyhound? By now, all the passengers were staring. Clearly, no one else was going to step forward and take charge. Carol took the wheel. To her amazement, she found she could handle it. Later, analyzing the dream, she figured Bruce Springsteen was the boss of her psyche. The bus was the vehicle of her life. The boss was telling Carol it was time to take the wheel. More than that, the dream, by actually setting her down in the driver's seat and letting her feel that she could control the vehicle on the road, was providing her with a simulator run to prime her with the confidence that she could actually take command in her life. A dream like that is real support. It's a check you can cash when you sit down alone to do your work. P.S. When your deeper self delivers a dream like that, don't talk about it. Don't dilute its powers. The dream is for you. It's between you and your muse. Shut up and use it. The only exception is you may share it with another comrade in arms if sharing it will help or encourage that comrade in his or her own endeavors. And this is what I wrote. We are caught perhaps not in a rat race or hamster wheel, but in a delusion of human necessity, unable to exist in solace and let ourselves truly work. Y'all, that I scanned the book right before this, and that caught my eye, and man, isn't that the truth? We are caught perhaps not in a rat race or a hamster wheel like so many of us blame why we're not living in accordance with who we say we want to be. but in a delusion of human necessity, unable to exist in solace and truly do the work. Y'all, I love ending these shows with a prompt, with a question, because this is the reality. The more of us who actually go inward and do the work. I had someone message me today and they said, Christene, you gave this prompt a year ago at an event. And after they did that prompt, they went off and wrote a book and they're about to publish it. Y'all, if we do this work, if we go inward, if we do the prompts, if we do and answer the hard questions, if we do the looking in the mirror that I always talk about, if we do the vertical alignments, that is the thing that can bring radical freedom, because the truth doesn't just allow for us to see change, to create. It ultimately sets us free. But we have to let go of the delusion around the need for others on the human playing field, on the physical dimension, on the horizontal, lateral level. Our core has to be strong. Our vertical alignment has to be rooted and grounded in the vision under the hierarchy of our ideals, with the divine at the head, our own ideal next, followed by the behaviors, the patterns, the beliefs, the mindsets, the programs that allow for us to live then horizontally. Connection on a human to human level is so beautiful and so important, but it comes after the willingness to go inward. It comes after the willingness to see the truth and know the truth and be set free by the truth. It comes almost as a sweet, beautiful reward for all of the work that we put in, all of that inner work that we've not put aside and used as an excuse for horizontal connection. But no, we've leaned in. We've done the work. And then, man, the degree of our connection speaks to the degree of the inner work that we've done. And it cannot and will not ever be the reverse. Connection cannot precede our own inner work. And so with that, I wish you all just such a wonderful evening.